Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Public Healthpreneur Podcast. I am your host, Quisha Member, the Public Healthpreneur. I'm excited to continue our conversation on mental health and entrepreneurship. And today, my good friend, Nerissa Malloy, is here to share her mental health journey and how she navigates it while being an entrepreneur. Nerissa, how you doing today?
I am well. Thank you, Quisha, so much for just having me on this podcast, for you, for honoring your assignment. I mean, you are doing a thing. So it's a pleasure to be here. Once you put it out there, I'm like, I know I have a story and anything for you. But yes, for sure. I'm
I
so
loved
glad.
it. When you saw I think you were like one of the first people. It's like, oh, I want to talk about grief. And I'm like,
Mhm.
yes, grief all day, every day. Because one of the things that I've shared is a theme with these interviews is none of us were really stressed. Maybe one person that we interviewed, the job,
Mhm.
entrepreneur was like the primary sense of her stress or source
Mhm.
rather of her stress and anxiety and other things like that. But for the most part, when we talk about mental health and entrepreneurship, it's not necessarily being an entrepreneur. We want
Mhm.
that. We know it comes with good, bad, ugly, dry spout. It's so funny. Yesterday, I was actually talking to a colleague of mine and I was singing Johnny Taylor, these last $2. Because I said, honey, I'm waiting on these invoices and all I'm saying is these last $2.
Say that again.
But that comes with the territory. The highs,
Yes.
the valleys, there's seasons of abundance, the low seasons. But what the struggle is for us as entrepreneurs, and you correct me if you disagree, is navigating life circumstances and life stressors. Because life is lifing still as you're trying to run your business. And that's when I'm really excited that we're having this conversation about some of the things you're going to share with our listeners because it's just navigating life and the stressors that come with it. What do you think?
I think you're so on point. And the difference is when you have a 9 to 5, you manage it because you know you have to show up. You got to get your 40 hours or 80 or 100, like me as a director. You got to get your hours in. You know that check is coming every 2 weeks. So you just are programmed to manage life and do that because you can't always call out. You can't do all of that. You can, you have FMLA and stuff, but then they want to listen. I know people that went through bereavement. They only get 3 days. They need more days. They've had struggles. I wasn't that type of person. But I'm saying when you have a full-time job, it's different versus when you have entrepreneurship and you don't have those
Supports.
right.
Yeah.
That accountability, that kind I have to show up. I have it, it's different when you have a business and especially as a solopreneur for some people, when it's just you feel like you could slide off the wagon. But when you have people and payroll and teams and stuff like that, you can't do that. You have clients, you have to show up. So yeah, let me tell you, it's really navigating the life stressors and it's in a different space when you're an entrepreneur versus when you have a full-time job for sure.
Well, let's get into it. Tell us
Yeah.
about your business, how long you've been in business. Give
Mhm.
us a rundown.
Sure. So, hey, everybody. Again, it's a pleasure. I'm Nerissa Malloy. I'm a business transformation strategist, and I work with service-based entrepreneurs to help them run their businesses more efficiently. So, I love doing that. I'm a nurse of 20 plus years in the healthcare space. My last stint was in the maternal child space, so I do some work there in the public health arena around that as well. And also, I love working with experts that are looking to package their expertise and just create an additional stream of revenue outside of their normal day to day, what they do for their 9 to 5. So I'm for women. I love building and supporting women and helping them to define and design their success. And so I'm excited to be here.
Excellent, excellent. Well, we're going to get right into these conversations. So,
Yes, let's get into
first
it.
question I want to ask you is what mental health challenges have you experienced during your entrepreneurial journey?
Ooh, what haven't? um, Today, I'm gonna focus on grief because there's so many different mental health challenges. You think about imposter syndrome, you think about rejection, depression, but definitely grief was one thing that I had to navigate, and it was twofold because I just left a job as a director running multiple departments. We were top performing unit. And God told me at this time it was time for me to move. I didn't know what He had in store. I knew I had my business, but not realizing that giving up that role was grief because as a registered nurse, you get our degrees, we get our jobs, our titles, and now you are separating yourself from a title. And so now it's like this new identity because you don't walk into the room saying I'm a director of this and that. And to be honest, a lot of healthcare professionals, we align ourselves and our worth is attached to our titles, our accolades, our degrees, all the different abbreviations and letters behind our name. So when in healthcare and nursing, I'm just being real, that's what it is. People
Yeah.
want to see all of that.
Oh my God. Wait, wait, I want to interject here because I remember when I left nursing and went into public health. And I always tell people I went through withdrawals for the first 6 months. And what you
Wow.
just said is so true because I was a nurse. Like, even though, 3 years prior up to that point, I was in a clinic, not necessarily at the bedside, but I was used to talking to patients. I was used to talking to their families. I was used to working with other healthcare professionals. I was the nurse. And there's some
Mhm.
kind of badge of honor, right? We're the most trusted professionals in what, I
Yes,
don't know, however many years running now. There's a badge of honor to saying I am a nurse. And
absolutely.
I seriously went through withdrawals for 6 months. And I remember I really had to change my mindset. And I said, Quisha, instead of caring for Mr. Jones or room 13, or I had
Hmm.
to say, you care for 77047. You care for 72156. You care for these zip codes and these 15 people that are your direct reports. And in turn, they're going to go and care. I had to really frame it
Right.
to where the zip codes, the communities, the cities,
Nice.
neighborhoods were my patients as opposed to the individual patient clients. And that's the only thing that really helped me, was really changing that mindset. So I'm so glad that you said that because it is
Hmm.
a grief of sorts.
It is because, and then think about it. You show up every day. You have the staff. You connect. You learn about their families, their struggles, and then you're home.
Yeah.
And it's like you don't have those interactions every day, the people, the conversation, the connections. So it is a sense of grief. And I didn't realize that in the beginning, but I was like, dang, I missed the place. My phone is not ringing all hours of the day. It just became abnormal not having two
Yeah.
phones. But
Right. Right. Wow.
so
So that was the first grief.
that
What
was
was
the first grief. Not knowing, so I left in December of 2022, not knowing by the end of January, I would have my dad with me as a full-time caretaker.
wow.
So watching that transition and now, oh, I'm full-time entrepreneur. I had this picture of what it's going to be like. But not knowing that I'm going to be the caretaker and building a business and trying to navigate and watching your parents slowly decline over the couple months while you're in business. You have to show up, you have to speak to clients, you're on lives, you're doing all the things, hosting webinars, hosting events, and then you have to come home. All right, hun, we take turns, or we can't go anywhere. You can't really vacation because who's going to watch dad? So it's a whole nother shift that came so quickly. But
Wow.
navigating the ups and downs in business, the imposter syndrome, the grief, and then taking care of your dad and watching them. This is the strong dad. I'm daddy's girl.
Wow.
And I'm just watching you slowly decline from walking around and dancing and stealing cookies off the stove to being completely bedridden, where we have to change you, bathe you, feed you, all of that. Like that process, what they call dementia, it's like a slow
Yeah.
death,
Yeah.
slow grieving. And so how do you manage that while running a business?
Yeah. That's the question we want to, that's the question. Like you got through it. You
I
got
got
through
through
it,
it with the
but
grace of God. And I'm telling you, it's having a good circle. Number one, having people that can support you and talk you off that ledge when you're ready to quit, and knowing how to navigate the healthcare system. That was important. And that's another reason why I'm shifting and adding a different arm of my business. But we'll talk about that on another podcast. But understanding that as a nurse, I knew what it was like in a hospital setting and I know what I didn't want. And I was just being honest. I know nurses were overwhelmed. It was right after COVID, short staff. And I know that wasn't the place for my dad. So we made sure we had care for him in the house. And then with the spouse, I had therapy for sure every week. every week I had a therapist to navigate that. And then I also had to pace myself, knowing, okay, planning, strategy, like knowing what this month is going to be, what the dates are for different webinars and podcasts, managing client calls, setting boundaries, using my calendar. Like, Quisha, I'm about strategy and
Yeah.
structure. So certain days were for clients, certain days were for calls, and then I had to block certain days out to just make sure if I knew therapy was coming this day or certain things, I had those times blocked out. So it's really about being strategic and having structure around your day. Otherwise, you're going to be all over the place, pulled
Yeah.
in multi directions. Don't forget, I got kids,
Yeah. So, okay,
husband.
wait. So let me see if I can get this timeline. God
Hmm.
told you to quit.
Hmm.
You left in December. You
Hmm.
were obedient. You didn't know
Hmm.
why.
No,
Your dad got sick, and you said dementia, so I'm assuming he had dementia that was increasingly
progressing.
worse, progressing. And in January, the very next month, he ends up living with you full time, and you're his full time caregiver.
Yeah.
Did it never cross your mind, ugh, let me just go back to work? This isn't the best time to be an entrepreneur right now.
I couldn't because I'm the primary caretaker. Me and my husband, we're taking roles. He has an aide.
Mhm.
Few hours in the beginning, they had the another one from hospice that came in a couple days a week, and the nurse. But at that point in time, it was so new, um, and it was like, how could I go to full time? Like I'm not gonna get time off or anything of that nature. So it was like this worked out perfectly for me to do that, and so, whew,
I want to stop you there because I think somebody is listening and they're saying, I want to start a business, but I got to take care of mama. I got to take care of daddy. And what you
mm,
said is, it was the best time for me. Not that it wasn't stressful, not that you didn't have to
right.
plan and keep a calendar and have processes and your strategy in place. Not that you didn't do all of that, right? But you're saying it was the best time for you to start the business, even though you were having to do all of these things that fall under the job duties of a caregiver.
It was the best time because you know what? At that point, I knew what I wanted for my dad. I knew what I wanted for my family, and I knew I still had to pay the bills. So you
Yeah.
got to hold it up. You got to get it together, Narissa, and you got to push like you never pushed before because you have more of the reason. If you want your dad to stay here and get the best care, and he was the happiest person on earth during that time, and that's all that matters. So it pushed me further to stay focused and, okay, listen, we got to get clients. I have these goals. I have these, and then working with clients, getting them to the outcomes, it became the primary focus. So it was just like having a job. I had to show up, but in a different way and for myself.
For you, that's, oh my God. And for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Earlier, you talked about showing up for the staff, for the meetings,
Mm,
for the organization. But entrepreneurship is getting up and showing up for yourself every single day
every day.
when you don't feel like it,
When you don't,
when you're unmotivated,
yeah,
you have a sick family member, when you're a
hmm,
full-time caregiver, you still get up and you show up.
every
That's
day.
such a
On the
profound,
weekends, everything.
all day, every day, until you can establish those boundaries. So tell me how these challenges that you've described first impacted you personally.
Hmm.
And then I want to know, because you talked about opening this whole service line and you said, oh, I'll get into that in another podcast. I want you to get into it now because
Yeah.
the things that happen to us, and this is one of the things I always share with my mentees, is when it comes to developing innovative solutions, is
Hmm.
usually as a result of some lived experience that we've gone through.
Absolutely.
So I want to know how these challenges impacted you personally, Nerissa, as an individual,
Mm-hmm.
but then also how has it impacted you as an entrepreneur professionally? And then talk about how this experience now has created the pathway for this new service line.
Wow. So, being a daddy's girl and again, watching your hero slowly decline, that was a slow grieving process. So that was definitely, I mean, I had moments of just breaking down in tears and crying and calling my therapist and my husband and supporting him. And he had his moments too when we saw different things or we thought we were going to lose him. And the one of the the troubling parts was this was the one time we finally said we were going to take a slow getaway, a quick getaway, a weekend getaway to where we went, Atlantic City, just for like 2 days. And
Mhm.
my mom came and stayed over, and that was the weekend that he passed.
Oh, Nerissa,
Yeah,
no. Oh,
it
Nerissa,
was.
I hate to hear that. But you look, I believe everything is divine intervention, right?
It's
Your
divine. It
dad
was.
was not about to leave with you there. He was not gonna pass with you there, ma'am. He wasn't gonna do
That's what it was. My mom was here and I was present. I was on FaceTime and walking her through the whole process and do this and do the post and I'm on the phone with her and then I'm dropping the phone and screaming at my husband like I'm losing him, I'm losing. It was such,
Oh, man.
but I knew that I couldn't be there and do it. And she was so strong, navigate her and the aide and just navigating that whole process. I told her, Mom, you were amazing. Like you did a good job.
Mhm.
But it was meant for us not to be physically present. And it was just funny. My husband just got into this routine. He would always check the camera. And it was that morning he checked the cameras like, Nerissa, your dad, something's going on. And I'm like, Don, you just won't just leave them alone. They got it. And then I looked at the camera and I was like, wait a minute. That nursing into I knew something was wrong. I called hospice. I said, you need to get there. He had that look of impending doom and I just couldn't
Yeah.
describe it, but I knew it. But I say all of that to say that whole process, Quisha, it was heart-wrenching, of course, like I mentioned, and having to navigate business and that and the emotions. But honestly, that month that he passed was my first five-figure month in business.
Wow. Which was a year ago, right? Wasn't
It
it?
was 2022,
Oh, okay.
and it's from all of the seeds that I've sown, the work, the people, the references, the referrals, like all of that. I was just sitting on the couch and my phone was going off. This person paid this balance, or this person sent the invoice, paid the invoice. And I was just like, look at God. Well,
And that's
just being obedient and in alignment. It wasn't easy. And I'm not telling anybody that it's easy, but it was doable, and
yeah.
only because I was being obedient, honoring my mother and father, being called and aligned with what God called me to do, and also pushing forward, that
Yeah.
thing, pushing
I
forward.
always say, when I went through what I was going through in quarter two, it was my first six-figure quarter.
Wow.
And I remember I made several posts about it. Like, I finally figured out how to do less and
Mhm.
make more money.
I
And it
remember.
wasn't any result of my own. I physically, emotionally, and mentally couldn't push myself to do more than I
Yeah,
was doing during that time, but it made me to focus on the priority. Lead
that
generation, client deliverables. That's it. If it wasn't lead generation and client deliverables, I couldn't do it. And so I think like you, I think it's a God moment, but I also
yeah,
think it just puts some things into perspective as well.
yeah.
And you being, a fairly new entrepreneur and going through that, that had to have felt, good,
Mhm.
despite all of this that I've been going through. I planted my seeds. I'm seeing the fruits of my labor. It's almost like dad giving you a pat on the back. Keep
Yeah.
going, baby girl. You got this. You can do it.
It is. And then the part about it that was even more trying is now navigating your new normal and
Mm,
then still trying to run the business. And
yeah.
that's where it gets even harder because you've done this work, you've done all the great things for your family member, and now it's like, how do I adjust? That little girl, that's my dad, that piece is gone. You have this emptiness in your heart. Like, how do you even show up for
Yeah.
business?
And you were not even used to running a business and not being a caregiver, right?
Well, no, well, I did. I had my business before, but I actually was full time in business. So I did have
Oh, you were
clients.
working at the
I was
time.
working and just,
Okay, but this is 100% full time. Okay.
100% full time. So imagine navigating grief and business and learning all these things. And then it was just a lot of transitioning in 1 year. And then so 2023 was the year of figuring it all out. and learning how to do it differently and removing the hustle mode and also managing grief,
Mhm.
like that loss, being sad, and what brings you joy, and identifying and learning, um, putting things in perspective that, we think about business and we think about all the things we want to achieve. But when you see life and you think about, I just lost my dad, and he was the happiest person on earth with like the bare minimum, it
Yeah,
makes you put some things in
in
perspective about
perspective.
why you do what you do and who you're doing it for.
So speaking of, great segue
Mhm.
into how this has impacted you professionally.
Wow, professionally, I definitely have pivoted my clientele. Um, it helped me to see bigger,
Mhm.
and right after COVID, a lot of people were, how can I put it? It was just about get this. It's like hustle. We trying to get this money, get these clients. It's pivoting to being a business owner, and like you said, lead generating, really quality leads, client delivery. Um, I got my first government contract in that space, just thinking bigger about what I do and what I could offer, and no longer thinking about hustle mentality. Understanding how much time is and how precious time
How
is.
precious it is, yeah.
And you just want to operate and do things differently and more meaningful and more impactful rather than just let me grab a whole bunch of clients. So
Yeah.
it definitely changed how I viewed my business, what I wanted for my business. And it wasn't just about coaching anymore. It's like, no, I need to have a bigger impact. And the only way I can do that is seeing bigger and moving into a bigger vision on how I can serve and collaborate and partner up and do all those things.
So, would you share a little bit about your new service line that comes as a inspiration as a result
Yeah.
of what went happen or the care
Yeah, so
you
I'm in the
provided to
early process of starting a home care agency, but I did have that on my board to do when my dad passed a couple months after, because I realized that what we did for him, other families should experience that or have the
you?
opportunity to have trusted professionals in their home, have the different services to provide, or be trained and have the opportunities, be able to have the setup, the different things that you want to provide for your caretaker. And because I was home full time, it's great. But what about families that are working? They definitely want someone that they can trust in their home. And so we are moving towards opening a home care agency. And that's what we want to do. And it's not just a home care agency, but it's about the care, the education, that personal touch that each family, each home will need, because everyone's situation is different.
Mhm.
So, and we offer some concierge services as well. So it's all new in the making. And when I say new, mean as far as the process, but it's been a vision and a discussion for the last 2 years.
I love
But,
that. And
just had to pace it. You can't do everything at one time. So we're working on that too. So
it's
I'm
a huge
excited about that.
undertaking, but I think it's such a beautiful way to honor his life.
Yeah, it is.
I love that so much. What's been your biggest lesson from your mental health journey as an entrepreneur?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. My biggest lesson is to honor your feelings.
Mm,
I was always one that I'm like, people look at me, I'm strong. Like my sister say, I'm the strong one. So dealing with that whole process and learning how to navigate, I really had to learn that it's okay to feel what you feel when you feel it. And who cares where you are or what's going on, but you can't suppress it because that's what gets you sick. I mean,
mhm.
I would cry anywhere. I'm at the nail salon and they would play the song played that me and my dad danced to. And I'm sitting there boo. Oh my God, boo-hooing, getting my nails done. And it was just like, I don't care. And it was okay. And I
Okay, to be
didn't feel
vulnerable.
crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and those experience you in Target, or I hear his favorite song and break down, and understanding that grief and learning that it'll come, it'll go, one day it'll hit you. And
Mhm.
if you just have to stop and just pause and do that.
Yeah.
Honor your body. That's been my biggest thing. Honor your feelings. That's
Yeah.
been my biggest
I
thing.
love it. I love that. Awesome. Okay. Are there any specific moments in your journey that stand out as turning points? I think you've been in business a total of 5 years, right? What has been the
5 years.
turning points for you?
Hmm. I've had so much turning points, Lord. I think the turning point for me was really making that pivot to doing something bigger and more impactful.
Hmm.
Because you get caught up a lot in what you see on the internet, trying to get invited to the things, trying to be present in all the different groups or the memberships. And it really came a point in time where I was like, I'm not looking for acceptance. I'm not looking for that that validation.
That's that's the word. Yeah.
I changed the whole that changed for me where I realized I have one person to prove to, and that's God. My dad is no longer here. He was my biggest supporter. Who cares about anything and anyone else? As long as I'm doing what I'm called and destined to do. So again, that puts so much into perspective. I kind of, at that point, I canceled some memberships, came out of some organizations. I was just like, especially realizing that a lot of people were just there just for that reason to get to their next. And it was just, I didn't want that. I wanted more meaningful connections, meaningful partnerships, meaningful relationships. So that was a turning point for me.
It's such
And
a great turning point too.
it
It's
is.
the aha moment where, because I think we get it as entrepreneurs, we get stuck in this cycle where it's a rat race. You got to make the money, you
Yeah.
got to come out with all the services, and you got to, and all the gurus will say you got to go live, and you got to have the podcast, you
Hmm.
got to do this, and you got to write the book, and you got to, and it's fine to do all of those things, but not at the expense of your mental health. That's what I had to tell my,
Absolutely.
nothing's wrong with doing all those things, but not at the expense of your mental health. It's just not.
Yep.
And so when you get to the realization where it's like, I don't need the validation. I don't need to go live every week. I don't, it's, I want these meaningful relationships and bigger impact.
Yeah.
And then,
Yeah.
and ironically, the bigger impact usually comes, in my opinion, with bigger pay, right? That's what
Absolutely.
wait, when you're not even doing all those things that everybody says you should be doing to build your business.
You're absolutely right. I mean, and look, we met. I can't even remember. I think from a podcast, but again,
No,
meaningful
the summit,
relationship. The
the
summit.
nursing summit. Yeah.
The summit, but again, it's meaningful relationships. It's not just about connecting and what can I gain. It's about
Yeah.
what can I offer you? What can you offer me? How can we support each other? Where are you? How are you feeling? Like those type of things. And that's what has shifted so much in business as well. I mean, I've gotten other business opportunities and so much because of creating meaningful
Mhm.
relationships. And that's tied to mental health too, because those are the relationships and the people that you would lean on when you are like, listen, girl, can you believe this happened? And they're
Yeah.
not going to tell you nothing crazy. So, mental health, again, is really about having that community. I say that all the time, that sisterhood. And it doesn't take a lot of people, just a handful of good people that you
That's
can just
it.
reach
Yeah,
out
I
to.
always say my circle's so small, it's almost straight, you know. But the people that's in it are solid people, especially in
Yeah,
business. You gotta have, entrepreneurship can be so lonely and
it
so
is.
isolating. Your family and friends that are not in business or self-employed, they don't understand, they don't know. But if you can
Right.
get you 3 to 5 good CEO buddies that
Hmm.
understand where you are. They've either been there or they're in the same spot you are. Maybe they're a little
Yeah.
bit ahead or behind, whatever. Community really can be the cure. I know it's been, sometimes I'll say you, Nerissa, like I'm struggling. This is what I'm going through. Like, oh, help me with this, right? And so I think you're so right, having that, because again, talking about the support system, you mentioned therapy, which is great. We
Yeah.
talked about that on every episode throughout this series, but having community is something that we haven't
Yeah.
talked about as I don't think at all. And I want to stress that community
Yeah.
can be the cure when you are going through life, and certainly in entrepreneurship as well. Man, you've shared some really good nuggets with us. And if you just could summarize this entire podcast episode
Mhm.
into one key takeaway that you want
Mhm.
the audience to remember from this conversation, what would that be?
Hmm. One key takeaway that I want entrepreneurs, especially women, that are listening to take away is to really honor your feelings. Know when it's time to hang it up, when it's time to take a break, know when it's time to shut down the computer. Your business, your bank account is not tied to your worth. So it's not the more work you do, the more money you make. Truly, it's not that. And that's what I've
That's the
learned.
employee mindset, isn't it?
It's
Yeah.
the employee mindset. It's not like that in entrepreneurship. So really honor yourself and focus on honoring good relationships.
I couldn't have said it better. Nerissa, tell people where they can follow you on social media. If you
Mhm.
also want to provide your personal as well as your business
Mhm.
contacts, that would be great.
Yeah, you can find me on social media as Nerissa.Malloy on Instagram, LinkedIn. I'm Nerissa Malloy, Facebook, everywhere else. I am Nerissa Malloy. And yeah, you can find me on all social media platforms. And yeah, website Nerissa, www.nerissamalloy.com.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Krisha.